Hello, my name is Christian Lehmann, and I'm here with two great Twitter friends that I've never met in person, Doctors Amy Pistone and David Wright. And we're here to try to do something new because we've shared many Twitter threads in the past. And so what we're going to do today is try to record a conversation that we otherwise would have had over the internet, but in person. And our topic is the blood of Zeus.
It's like we need some sound effects.
Yeah.
So let's
start
like that Phantom Menace soundtrack they had in episode 1.
What do you guys think about this? The opening, the advertisement.
I like it.
Yeah, I mean, we have the labyrinth pattern there. We have.
Yeah, I like the meander a lot. I thought that was really nice. I think it definitely clued me into kind of more or less what to expect. I would say that, I mean, this is something we'll talk about as we get into it, but the blue eyes, I think, are striking and definitely gave me some questions. But I think it definitely sets the tone nicely, situates it within classics.
Yeah, and even like the little curls on the side of the hair, you get certain aspect there. I like that it's looking up in order to kind of convey this idea of the celestial. And frankly, I'm just thrilled that they didn't use any Greek letters in the title.
The faux Greek letters, yeah. The lambda for alpha, the sigma for E. Yeah.
Well, I could just imagine the people like trying to put a sigma there at the end of Zeus.
Yeah.
I guess that would be proper, but.
Or sigma and in place of the E. Yeah.
Yes. That's what
that would be, that's where you'd really get.
Yeah. For the, right in the like planning development, they were saying that would be really cool. Let's do it. And then they checked Twitter and they're like, no. Classicists hate it.
Classicists will be so mad at us.
Yes.
They're going to create a video series destroying it.
Some serious griping, yeah.
So the opening is quite striking because it opens with just a few words of text. The tales of Greek mythology were part of an oral tradition. Many were never transcribed, and through the ages, some were lost. This is one of those tales. Ellipsis.
Dun, dun, dun.
Well, and I mentioned this to you too, but I think the Lost Books of the Odyssey has the same conceit of, we found this papyrus and this is one of the tales that doesn't survive, but situating it within that absence that we know is there. I love when people try and fit like, this is one of the many tales of the epic cycle that don't survive. That I really am always charmed by that conceit.
Yeah, and I like it. It seems to almost even respect the audience by using this commonplace oral tradition. But not everybody knows what an oral tradition is, that there's a difference between orality and textual. And so it kind of almost teaches you that by giving you oral tradition next to transcription.
Yeah, I feel like it's just like a nicer, like as Amy was saying, it's like a nice reminder that like, yeah, so much stuff we have is just like not there. And I feel like also it's like kind of nice for us to remind ourselves, like when we're trying to make these like theories about things that are like this is based upon like just a few texts we have just for one author, and it's just like not the full picture. But I feel like this series really kind of, well, this opening at least really speaks to that.
Yeah, and I should mention we will only be talking about the first 4 episodes, so. This is going to be spoiler full for the first 4 episodes, but we have not seen past that. So just be aware of that as we continue forward. And one of the things that I like about this is we're going to draw a lot of connections to text that we know that it's riffing on. But at the same time, by giving us this opening, if we can't find a one-to-one correspondence, that's not a place of criticism anymore.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I love that this is also, seems like it almost heads off the people who are like, well, that's not what it's like in Homer, which I think is such an impulse when we see something that's inspired by or in reaction to some kind of a Greek text or a Greek story tradition, that you get this impulse to like, well, that's not what it is in the Iliad. And this kind of pedantic nitpicking of what is and isn't, true or correct. And I think I love this reminder of there are a bunch of stories, and some of them we have and some of them we don't, but this isn't supposed to be any one particular story. This is another story in this world.
It'd be very boring, I think, for us and for everyone to just like told the story of the Iliad like exactly as it was, right? It's like everything, and also everything is an adaptation too. It's important like to like remind ourselves too, like, oh yeah, so this is like fan fiction, like Virgil's fan fiction of Homer, where it's like, well, Homer was the fan fiction of the oral tradition, like, where do you draw the line with that? So
yeah. And one thing too I like that it emphasizes is through the ages, some were lost. And so there's this idea of accrual that can happen, because one of the things we'll be talking about, I'm sure, is like the number of other references that kind of filter through this material. So it is definitely not just like, hey, here's some straight archaism for you. So for me, one of the moments that it really like established its bona fides is in the Gigantomachy, a spear goes through a mouth. And I loved this, and we'll talk about this scene a little bit more. But what I liked so much is it actually is a little bit Homeric, because like spears are always going through mouths and teeth. And it's like establishes immediately, hey, we have read this. We're not showing you Idomeneus striking Aramis, but we still know that spears go through mouths in myth. All right, so here's early on, an old man. We don't know who that old man is yet. It's Zeus. Tells the story.
Spoilers.
I know. Hey-oh. And I just thought we could talk for a second, because we get this setup between the giants versus the Olympians. And I don't know, what stands out to you about the representation of the giants?
I mean, to me, as someone who also likes kaiju movies, it's really sort of tapping into the whole. I mean, it's perfect. Like the Gigantomachy is like perfect, for a kaiju movie, and that's the sort of one thing that just felt to me is like, yeah, not really a classics thing, but like this is clearly like they're evoking like the kaiju movie tradition, and then like probably more recently movies like Pacific Rim.
Well, and I also the floating guy kind of over here on the back there. Yeah, perfect. But I really like, because it also to me speaks to like a superhero movie tradition, right? Mm-hmm. That kind of epic, the modern epic tradition of the superhero, like a Dr. Manhattan, these
like a Vision. I see him kind of like this Vision.
Yeah, exactly. I think we have a lot of these like extra powerful superhuman figures that tend to kind of float around in this way, that I think that depiction does look back to a lot of different Greek inflected, Greek mythology influenced things. But yeah, I think just kind of this range of visual, a lot of snaky stuff, a lot of limbs, which is, as David mentioned, super apt for a depiction of the giants, who are in a lot of traditions very snaky.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about this until you brought up the superheroes, but a lot of these look like Spider-Man villains. Like you have this scorpion-like creature here. This fellow you can't see, but he has that rhino horn, and Spider-Man has a rhino villain. I love the color scheme here as well, and it's going to contrast really strikingly as we shift. So here are our Olympians for the first time. And this is, here on the far left, we have Apollo without his chariot, Poseidon, Hera, Zeus.
Hermes, right?
Hermes, right. Oh yeah, because you can see the Caduceus there, Ares, and somebody that we think is Hades.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, like, is Hades often mentioned in the Gigantomachy, Titanomachy? Like, I don't remember him coming up, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But he does seem like he's pretty important in this version anyway.
It's funny because one of the things that like is standing out to me this time looking at this is how much it bothers me that he has 3 spikes on his helmet, but only 2-pronged spear.
Yeah,
like he's rocking the bident.
Well, he won't have the bident for long.
Bident, monodent.
Yeah. So it also points out something that I talk about a lot, like in some of my classes. If we jump back, none of these figures are wearing clothing, and the gods are all wearing clothes, and so it's like this sartorial civilization of, we know they're superior.
Well, and that they're so anthropomorphic, right? That we don't have this range of like sneaky, kind of chthonic, any of that. It's this very kind of uniform, and we haven't seen Hephaestus, but for the most part, it's kind of this like very normative uniform body that, right? And I think that's always such a contrast between when we think about the previous generations. They're these kind of chaos and Tartarus, and a lot of the versions of what comes before, they're not formed like people, right? They don't have the forms that we think of as being these very anthropomorphic Olympian deities.
Yeah, it's interesting because like the Titans, we don't get too many descriptions of them. We don't have many visual representations of Titans either. Like, yeah, obviously we get Prometheus here and there, but he's like in the conflict, he's usually on the side of Zeus. But yeah, the Titans, we don't get really descriptions of them in Hesiod. But eventually they do get conflated with the giants.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like the show is kind of doing that too. But one other thing that did jump out at me with as sort of like a common theme among the giants was that a lot of them seem to be associated with like natural elements, like the one flying guy. He's sort of like I know later in this sort of flashback you see him create this wind, and like for example like Typhon, who's not technically a giant or a Titan, but also Typhon gets thrown into this like anti-Olympian battle. Typhon is associated with winds because once he's destroyed, like he becomes winds essentially. So I kind of like how they do so Typhon into the giants, Titans, whatever you want to call these, as like quasi elemental.
Yeah, and I'm also noticing now, looking at this, how many more kind of breasts we have with the Titans. For instance, there's like at least 3 figure here, 4, 5 even, whereas it's only Hera standing out. And as we'll note, like the role of the female gods in these first 4 episodes is limited to Hera largely.
Mm-hmm.
So that's.
I'm gonna wait until we get there, but I have thoughts.
Yeah. And also typically the giants are all male in like the like original myth. Which is interesting. So they here we do have like the female monster which like pops up. Actually no, like in Euripides' Ion, this is Euripides like changing things, but he puts the Gorgon, just like the generic Gorgon, in the Battle of the Gigantomachy, and there the Gorgon's clearly female. Yeah, typically the giants are all masculine, which is so interesting how they throw some feminine monsters here.
Yeah, which fits though because like the monster generation, right? The echidna and various things like that; those are all feminized.
Right.
Yeah, it seems like sort of blending together like the chthonic monsters, where you have all of these like very female, your Furies and your, you have a lot of these echidna and Scylla, and you have so many of these sort of female coded monsters or monsters that used to be women, and they've kind of put that together with our giants. So you have these kind of 2 different chthonic-y non-Olympian forces that are getting kind of blended together here a little bit.
And I think also in terms of some of those like ideas of duality, here we have our chthonic entities in water. So we have wet and then the dry cliff top where our...
Well, and kind of connected, if we want to go real like structuralism here, like they're very connected to the ground, right? Whereas our Olympians we're looking much more celestial. We have this backdrop of the sky. And so kind of thinking about, binaries that are being drawn out here, I think it really invites kind of these different readings of the different visual appearance that we get right out the gate.
And I think that's good to be thinking maybe about binaries because we're going to have 2 brothers and kind of 2 mother figures. So it is setting up because it's
Olympian,
good story.
Chthonic, yeah.
Yeah. So we're just bringing this in quickly. This is the bident of Hades. And this will come up because of superpowered weapons, but it's a brief moment. However, I do want to point out that we have this weapon wielded, which later on one of the characters will pick up.
He throws it in the back of the spiky giant.
Yeah, but he doesn't get it back. He doesn't collect it.
He's like forget. He's like, oh yeah, like oh well.
Yeah,
seems like it's kind of important to Hades, but
Chekhov's bident, as I think that's the technical term for this.
Yeah. Or the idiom that I would now use is like, he's pretty sus. Like if the Olympians are out playing among us, like.
Look how hip and trendy you are with your lingo.
It's true. All right, so here's kind of our first philosophical idea where Zeus goes and negotiates with 2 of these titans. And at the moment we have, and with this, reason and compromise were introduced to the world. And so just curious what you guys think about this as almost a declarative statement of society, development, progress.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, like, I guess, yeah, they're kind of following like the theogony here. Like, it's kind of what Zeus is good at. He's like able to convince some of these chthonic figures, or we want to call them, to come to his side. And like it's interesting. I feel like the text he presented, like Zeus's Metis, or later representations, like, oh, Zeus like was clever in this war against the giants. He couldn't win it just on his own, so they kind of had to do this clever thing. So in that way, I guess it's sort of like cleverness, but like the way this spins it here as like reason, it kind of has that whole like the myth of progress, and like implies, oh yes, like the Olympians are sort of more civilized here. And yeah, but if you look at the way the Olympians act, Zeus in particular, reason and compromise aren't two things I think of when I think of Zeus.
Well, and I think, I think a lot of this, when we want to talk about influence of intervening things, right? The other types of stories that we as modern people are going to be thinking about when we write these stories, when we adapt these stories, like this feels much more in keeping with this narrative of progress, this kind of taking formless void and making order and things out of it, which in some ways feels a little bit like these are some story shapes that are more modern. Mm-hmm. That like there's this, the inevitable progress and kind of a, I don't know, modernism or something like that. Whereas, I think at least in story form, Hesiod, for instance, like there's a lot of emphasis on it not being, it's not this orderly march towards something better that's reason. It's cyclical overthrow. It's, we have a narrative of decline with the ages of man. Like there, this idea of like, yes, Zeus puts laws. Those are kind of very classical Greek things, but I do think some of this idea of this being this like trajectory towards a better world is maybe something a little bit more modern coming in here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think like because we were talking about how based on that opening shot they can kind of make their own story. Rhea is completely allotted here, and so is Gaia, right? So David, you were talking about like reason coming in, but these are all like female ideas that are given to Zeus about things he should do, and here it's just like Zeus is the agent. And it's so bizarre. Like he's like, oh, reason and compromise. But later we'll see him behave in ways that are maybe not representative.
Hear me out though. Isn't our speaker here Zeus? So
yes.
I mean,
yes. That's cool.
This feels like a very
unreliable narrative.
Like Odysseus, when Odysseus tells us what Odysseus did, like, and maybe we should be a little bit wary of just taking Zeus at his word when like, yeah, the story that Zeus in disguise tells about Zeus is going to make Zeus look pretty good.
Yeah, I love that. So another thing that I like in terms of maybe referencing the theogony, we have the 100-hander kind of here and the Cyclops here being brought in. So conflating traditions, which makes a lot of sense if you're saying like, oh, we have our own tradition that's separate that we're drawing on, and like we have similar elements, and so we just piece them, kind of plug and chug in different ways.
And yeah, as someone who just studies the Dragon Time, looking at like this happens all the time, where like 100-handers and Cyclops get thrown into these battles, and basically the poets often sort of whatever they need to sort of fit their story. They'll throw in that monster if they need it. Yeah.
Well, and we get a lot of these where there's two different births of Aphrodite. We seem to have two different traditions of Cyclops. Like, where do Cyclops come from? What's their deal? Like, so I feel like for a lot of these stories, like, here's a slightly different version of where the Cyclops come from. Like, that feels fine to me when we think about kind of the vast world of mythical stuff going on. That this is a slightly different version. It's normal for it feels like they belong here just fine with the 100-hander. Like, why not?
And I think it's a great thing. Like, I'm thinking of sometimes paralleling how would you use this in class, and this is a great example, like where you could just like bring in this opening shot and say like, hey, like let's talk about these parallels. Like, you've just closely studied this thing, and now we can watch this 22-second clip and like do all that intellectual work.
Absolutely.
So briefly, later on, our friend Zeus, old man, is also going to tell another story. We won't dwell on this too much, but this moment's really great because he performs an ekphrasis of a pot. And essentially what he tells is book 11 of the Metamorphoses about dreams and figures that influence dreams. Also a careful way of being like another moment. It's like we tell our students, oh, well, here's an ekphrasis. This is what it is, like exploration of art within art. And now you have an actual example that you could show somebody.
Yeah.
But then again, I'm thinking, Amy, about what you said earlier about how tendentious it is, that it is through Zeus telling this story. That hadn't occurred to me at all, and I love it.
And the next thing I think of is like how often ecstasies are misinterpreted. Maybe I guess I was thinking of like book 1 of the Aeneid when Aeneas looks at the image of the temple of Zeus, image of the temple of Zeus, Juno, and how he says, "Oh yeah, this is great. Everyone knows us." It's like, well, isn't it actually that like this is a celebration of the defeat of the Trojans? And yeah, going on what Amy said earlier about like, oh, should we trust Zeus? It's like, well, like, are we going to trust Zeus telling the story, but also Zeus's interpretation of this work of art?
Well, and especially when we have, I mean, I think we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the story that's being told in this ekphrasis is the sort of genesis of true and false dreams, like the oneroi, and the, you know, which is such a constant, like, yeah, gods can tell you important things through dreams, but also sometimes Zeus can send a false dream just to mess with you if you're Agamemnon, right? Like if and we see this all throughout, right? There's like 2 gates that dreams can come out of, and you know, that prophecy can come out, and like I think that is in such keeping with kind of the reading and misreading of ekphrasis, that we're going to have dreams later, and like, are they true? Are they not true? What do we make of these things? And so I think it does such a nice job of framing, like this whole first episode, I think frames so many of the issues that are going to be relevant later, right? We have the setup of where the gods come from. We get some themes that are important. And at this point, it's worth saying, we don't know that this man is Zeus. It's not until the end of this first episode. And so it just seems like it's an old man telling a story. And so, you know, it kind of forces us to reread once we realize that this is Zeus. And we realize it's Zeus before the young man here realizes that it's Zeus. And so there's kind of these moments of reassessing and reevaluating what we knew about the story, which I think is so, you know, it just invites this kind of careful reading and rereading and thinking about kind of narrators, and can we trust our narrators and things. So I think it's really valuable from that perspective.
And I think that's a great strategy for like Netflix to evolve, because if you're creating bingeable content, you want to create something that you don't just finish and end, but it's like, oh wait, I need to go back because I just built on something, but then I missed it. I need to.
Well, and I think, again, I mean, if we want to talk about how we could use this in the classroom, right? Like this would be a really great, I think, having stories that are in a medium that is more, feels more familiar, more comfortable for students. I know a lot of times when we read Homer or something, students feel like they're not expert enough to have opinions about. And so I think doing some of these exercises of rereading, close reading, rereading, in something where students feel more on their, like, on home turf, right? Watching something on Netflix is a much more comfortable medium than reading an epic poem with references they might not get, right? This does a lot of the work of making sure you know what you need to know, so students are immediately can engage in that close reading of image, of description, of all of these different mythical reference, things like that. So yeah, I think it pairs really nicely with the text. The students might not feel as confident critiquing or digging into in the same way.
Yeah, and I think students might also embrace engaging. Like when I showed the trailer to my myth students, they all immediately said, this looks like Castlevania. It's like, this is a medium that is familiar to me to enter. Unlike, now let's read the Aeneid. And it's like, what is this thing? All right, so at the end of the first episode, as Amy mentioned, we have the reveal that the old man is Zeus, and Ares comes down, and Zeus has this and there's this debate about, oh, can you help people or not? So Zeus articulates, if man is meant to inherit the earth, they must do so on their own accord.
Yeah, this sort of made me think of like related to what you both brought up before, but it's sort of like this modernist like progress theme to it. And also there's like a thing that happens in so many modern representations of any work that deals with the Greek gods, or just gods that aren't the Christian gods. It's sort of like, oh, there's this sort of like, our world is coming to an end and we need someone else to take this over. And that's sort of the vibes I got from this first episode too, and later episodes of just like, yeah, I mean, we know the Greek gods, like they're not ideal. It's not the ideal way to like govern the universe. And I don't know, we'll see where the series goes with the more sort of like humankind inheriting the earth. I mean, I've already sort of detected a lot of, as I'm sure you have, like kind of like Christianizing ideas or themes to the show too, with like the demons and and things like that.
And I don't think you can have a phrase "inherit the earth"
right
without entering the
Bible.
New Testament.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because, right, like Zeus's idea is like not that the meek shall inherit the earth. He's like, no, like we need to like help man to fight, and then they can inherit the earth.
Although I do think I get a lot of sort of Homeric-ish vibes from this too, and we're thinking about how much the gods can be involved in this fight that is, at least in part. I mean, we haven't talked about what demons are yet, but I mean, the demons used to be humans. At least I think they all have, right? I think they all start off as humans. And so the idea, this is fundamentally a fight between humans, and that the gods shouldn't be getting involved in this too much, which feels a lot like in the Trojan War, where we get like, can I go save my favorite? And there being limits to, the gods all want to go, like Zeus wants to save his favorite sons, and kind of these discussions about like, well, you can't save someone when it's not their time to be, like, when they need to die, they need to die. If you start saving all your favorites, then everyone's going to save all their favorites. It'll be chaos. And so like this idea, exactly. And so I felt like this idea that the gods can't be too involved does kind of echo some of the stuff that we see in the Iliad.
Yeah.
But the line's still so unclear, like in the Iliad and the Aeneid, like it's like there's this idea you can't do it too much, but they're always breaking the rules all the time, and like but you can see the tension with the Olympians against Zeus. It's like, come on, Zeus, you can't be doing this, but yeah, it's just so hard to know where they draw the line, And
Ares is very clear about that. He says like, okay, I'm gonna go tell everybody else now that you changed the rules, we're all gonna go play by your new rules for a while.
Also, Ares' accent, was that Australian? Do you know what that was? What's going on with that?
I didn't pick up on the subtleties of the accent.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Some have British accents, some have American accents, and then I couldn't tell if this was Australia or something.
I do kind of like Ares with the Warhammer though. That's kind of.
Yeah, I like just kind of this like brooding, gloomy looking Ares. I kind of like that aesthetic.
Yeah, in terms of like the superhero connections, it's very Punisher. This one.
I see that.
Which feels about right for Ares. Yeah. That seems like a reasonable echo there.
So Zeus falls in love with Elektra, whose name we don't really learn, but that's going to be our hero Heron's mom. And he shows up. I'm just showing this image early on because it's like Zeus as the romantic courtier.
Well, how do we want to talk about this? Where do we start?
Hey, so I mean, I think this is one of the big issues that comes up with when we retell Greek myth, right? That what do we do with things about our source text that are distasteful to us, right? And I think, I mean, we no longer refer to women who Zeus rapes as like the loves of Zeus. I mean, some of us still do, but we're collectively as a field, no one in this hall does that.
Yes.
And kind of moving away from like, okay, that is sexual assault, that is kidnapping, that is rape. But when we think about telling this for a modern audience, well, maybe we don't want it to be a story of sexual violence. Like, what if we change it to be more in keeping with what we want a sexual relationship to be? And a lot of times I think that does mean, this comes up a lot with Hades and Persephone of like, well, if we want this to be like they are married, maybe we don't like that it starts off with a kidnapping and a rape. So maybe we make it a love story. And in some ways, right, we remove some of the sexual violence. We tell a story that is maybe more in keeping with the story we want to tell now. And we're reusing these characters in ways to tell the stories we care about now. And we don't want every single hero to be born out of really violent origin stories. That said, it means that we're alighting a lot of violence, and we're alighting gendered violence and sexual violence. And I think this comes up a lot. So here, we get this recast of Zeus as, like, he really is, I mean, he's definitely not perfect, but he is a much more romantic, like, he is wooing her. He seems legitimately invested in this woman, which is not true to the Zeus that we normally see in ancient Greek texts. And I don't think that is to say that we can't ever have that version of Zeus. Like, I think this is another different way of telling stories about these characters. But I think it is a really complicated question of if we want to retell like sexual and romantic relationships for our modern times, it does involve some changing of our gods. And so anyway, I am okay with this as long as we don't act like this is what the ancient Greeks thought. As long as we kind of recognize that when we talk about this, when we watch this, and like, this is not what Zeus in most of our texts, that this is not how he behaves. That's fine. This is not a story for an ancient Greek audience. This is actually a story for us. And so it matters what stories we want to tell and what stories we want to consume. And stories of rape is maybe not what we want all of our stories to be about necessarily.
In one, though, with very specific way, it is repeating because he's disguising himself as her husband when he first comes. But it gives her agency because it's kind of Penelope-like, because she's like, now you love me when you say it, but other times you don't. And so she recognizes that, and she's like, who are you? And so it, like, in a way, it gives Elektra agency for recognizing that she's being deceived, which makes it all the more complicated and rich, I think, to discuss.
Yeah, so I guess it complicates in a certain way because they're like, still Zeus isn't being that great by like having sex with her and not being upfront about who he really is. Like, that is still like a problem, right?
Well, and I think this is I would think about pairing this with stories of Hercules, right, or Heracles, or whatever tradition we're in, but where Zeus takes the form of her husband, and how do those stories play out differently? I mean, I think this is a really nice contrast to think about. What do the ancient Greeks do with this story where Zeus never, like, he takes care of Heracles, but he doesn't care about, he doesn't care about the woman involved in this. She's a means to an end. She's beautiful. He wants to sleep with her, and that's it. Whereas here, he sticks around. I mean, he goes to quite great lengths to be there and to help out and to protect and to to a point. I mean, Electra's wife is not great. Heron's life is not great, but Zeus is there all the time taking care of them. And so I think I don't know. I mean, I think it's a really interesting story to put alongside stories of Heracles and see how these different stories compare and contrast, like what different values or agenda, to think about why someone might tell the story this way instead of that way.
And he does go into self-imposed exile as that old man to keep watching over them, as you said. So there's that sense of sacrifice.
But then also later, Heron will like rightfully kind of call him out. It's like, you were there, but you're like, is this really the best life for us right now? Yeah. And like, why couldn't you have done better? Which I kind of liked.
So in a future slide, we will come back to these blue flowers for all of you that are watching and want us to do that. This is a slide courtesy completely to David, because Zeus has some sweet eyebrows.
You got to talk about them. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So when I was in elementary school, one day I lined up at recess and a person behind me had, in the back of his hair, the person had carved like a Nike sign. And that's very much.
Oh, I remember when that was.
That was a thing.
Yeah, where like you used to put logos in your hair, and it's like, so Zeus, right, has these lightning bolts. So I've written here, these aren't Kuanorfrus, like they're not like dark brows, they are Keraunofrus. They are lightning brows.
That's official now. It's canon.
Yeah.
Lightning browed Zeus.
What would be fun? We should like search the textual tradition and see. Maybe there is.
Yeah, is there some sort of like thunder browed, or I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I just couldn't stop looking at them. I'm just, just like, Dave, my eyes are down here, but I don't know. Yeah. Pretty amazing.
So something I want to talk about quickly is just the architectural construction of Olympus. This is a night shot, and I also have juxtaposed to it, I guess, another night shot, but not in the mist. I love this. I don't really have anything like, I mean, I imagine if we were to talk to an archaeologist, they would be able to say much more.
Is that a stadium down there, down to the left or something?
Yeah, well, this is, I think, where the fight at the start of episode 3.
Oh, right.
When they do that whole bit.
Is that sort of the gladiatorification of the ancient world? You got to have some sort of like gladiator type combat.
Yeah, with those elevated. I love this like
I was
elevated.
gonna say I like that it has. Yeah, it looks
Where's
very
the
much like
Jumbotron?
a modern stadium for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very pretty. And I think again we get that very like the the celestial kind of the Olympians who are very much up in the air.
Yeah, and that's good, like because it's all in clouds here, for instance, and that here we can see they're above the clouds. So,
yeah,
but it's human architecture, right? That's another thing to kind of emphasize is in terms of anthropomorphizing the gods, they live in human dwellings, as opposed to the caves that we're going to see. All right, so Hera learns about Zeus and Elektra, and in the first instantiation of her rage, we see her walk into a room to stare into and shatter a mirror, which feels very Disney princess to me.
Yes. Mirror, mirror on the wall.
Yeah, with the bird.
I might hear her thoughts until later, but I do think
on me right now.
I think it is very right. Like I think when you mentioned we were talking in advance, like Maleficent, right? That it's this very wicked, like evil stepmother kind of a vibe. But I'm gonna share my deep rant about Hera when we get to the
great. So one thing I want to point out that is I think this is part of that what we were talking about, common vocabulary. Like if you were showing this to students, it's like they might recognize this as, oh, she's being set up to be a villain. So maybe the show is actually going to subvert that. But at this moment, it is complete wicked stepmother and Sleeping Beauty type.
Well, and I think I would say that for people watching at this moment, setting someone up as a wicked evil stepmother with Once Upon a Time, with Maleficent, with I think we're a little bit primed to think maybe there's more to her side of the story, right? I think we're a little bit primed for kind of a reclaiming, a retelling, because so many of our versions, right, we're in such a moment of retelling stories of like stereotypical villain tropes and rethinking them. And so I would say, and again, I mean, I actually really like the depiction of Hera in this. And I've seen a lot of people on Twitter complaining about how Hera's been done dirty by this show. I actually really I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that I like about the depiction of Hera here. So I might be inclined to read this as wanting to subvert some of those tropes, because I see there being a lot of room to subvert some of these tropes in the depiction of Hera.
Yeah, I know we are definitely going to get to that. I guess I kept saying stepmother, but I never realized it until Amy, you said it. Like Hera is going to be Heron's stepmother.
Yeah.
Which that's kind of a woof. It gives us so much more to work with.
Which, when you think about it, like Hera is in fact like the stepmother for almost all of the heroes. So when we think about like the heroes that Hera pursues, she is in fact the kind of the stepmother of all of them. Like she's married to their father, so that does sort of, so for a modern audience, right? I mean, we don't necessarily have all of that when we're thinking about in the ancient context. We don't have those tropes that operate in the same way, but like for a modern audience, we can't not think about like, oh well, I think we all know how stepmothers are, because we're so primed by Disney and Grimm's fairy tales and things.
Which is what happens when like, all of these traditions are coming together and things are getting lost and things are mixing, to go back to those opening slides. So at this point, Hera goes in to seek out the Oneiroi. And it's something that I just want to point out they use all this architecture, but what they've done is they've dedicated above the capitals, the conquest of the giants. And this is a completely unnecessary detail. I completely missed it until I was pausing and clicking and pausing, and it's beautiful. And also like shows the Olympians are conquerors. Like they conquer in a way that is imperial in terms of like, we're going to represent the defeated. Yeah,
the display of the conquest, sort of the putting the trophy up to remind everyone. I think that the spolia or whatever is
and just a very nice, like a nice little triglyph again, like things you don't need to do, but they do. Like it's nice to watch a show where when you pause it, there's detail. All right, so now we're jumping back to Heron, who was sent on a quest to go gather adamantine. Much like if you play Zelda, you have to go gather seashells in order to get the Master Sword. I stole that joke from David from an earlier conversation. So
I'm playing Breath of the Wild, so it was on my It's out of my mind.
Well, and the climbing, when Heron has to climb the mountain, that's like, you know, I've only played Blessed of the Wild once, but I died because I climbed a mountain and I ran out of breath. Or I got too cold. I did something.
And I feel like we have a convergence of like the ancient and the comic book here too, because like, yeah, like adamantine is mentioned in like the ancient text, and we have like adamantium is such a thing in the comic book world too. So it all like comes together nicely.
That's great. When I saw this, I was just thinking about the sickle, but obviously Wolverine is
that's me. I think of, but I think other characters.
I think that's the one that's closer to mind. I think for most, right? I mean, I think X-Men. I think that's much more to people who are not classicists. I think probably Wolverine is the immediate association you have with adamantium.
And seeing it later, it seems like it does work like adamantium in the Marvel universe, where it just like can cut through anything.
It also introduces this idea of a super weapon, a special weapon, which isn't really, in my mind, part of like a Greek tradition, other than like the armor of Achilles. But
I guess the shields in the 7 against Thebes, but again, that's more like you said, like markers of like identity as opposed to like having special powers.
Well, and I think we do see some. I mean, they're the kind of things that Homer kind of suppresses from the Trojan stories that he's telling. But like the bow and arrow, Heracles bow and arrow that Philoctetes has, they have to go get, right? So I think we do get some of these like magic items, but they're so suppressed in the Homeric version. Like we only see a few moments of these like weird magic items.
Homer doesn't like magic.
Yeah, it doesn't like magic.
Yeah, because you're not questing for them. Like when Heron gets mad about this sword, he's gonna throw it and it winds up in a mountaintop, and it's very like Sword in the Stone moment to bring in another story.
Well, and the thing that I thought about with this, aside from, you know, Zelda and other like other modern comic booky sword kind of things, was where we do have a lot of heroes that, like Theseus, right, has a sword that is part of like his sword, and his sandals are the things that are going to make him recognizable when he comes of age and he'll be recognized as the hero. So I think there is sort of as like a token, so not a magic sword per se, but a sword as some kind of a token. And this is a sword that is to some extent given to him by his father, right? Like his father helped him make it. He doesn't know it's his father at the time, but so I think there are aspects of a lot of different kind of hero stories out there, Greek and non-Greek, but I think there are a lot of things that it's echoes and drawing on stuff. Not that this is a clear like, this must be the sword of so-and-so, but that we have a lot of these echoes of different heroic traditions where we go, oh yes, a young hero has a sword. Like that's drawing on a lot of symbols I know.
Mm-hmm. And onomastically, a young hero named Heron. Like, which we haven't really, So the episode ends with the introduction of Cerberus, and which, if you saw these eyes, it's kind of cool because it's this kind of moment where if you see these, you recognize, okay, this is going to be Cerberus. But if you don't, it's easy to just think, it's going to be 3 different beasts, which then makes the opening shot of the next episode more interesting, I think. So thoughts on Cerberus in general versus like Cerberus in this show?
I don't like that he's a bad guy here. I don't like that he's a scary monster and he's fighting for the baddies.
He's always a scary monster.
Not always. Sometimes people do very cute cartoon drawings of Cerberus where he's adorable, and that's my preferred Cerberus, just for the record. I like when you have 3 little cute doggos trying to squeeze out of a hole and you get a very adorable little Cerberus. That's all.
Sometimes you feed Cerberus a nice cake that makes him go to sleep.
Yeah.
As opposed to like take a tree branch and thrust it through one of Cerberus's heads and then the other Cerberi gnaw it off.
What I saw
on principle, as someone with a very cute dog, I like when dogs are cuddly. That's all.
But I saw it, I was sort of excited because, like, if you know me, I'm into Underworlds, and I was like, oh wow, so they're bringing Underworld beast out of the Underworld where we don't really belong, but like famously, like Heracles brings Cerberus out of the Underworld. That's sort of this big moment. But I'm also really interested when so we actually go to the actual Underworld in episode 4. So you have a literal, the words catabasis going down into the world of the dead. There's also a trope sometimes too that happens in ancient texts and especially in modern texts of like when the Underworld comes above. So I'm like, ooh, are they into that whole thing of like, the hell on earth theme, which seems to be happening because we have like demons running around. So I'm super excited where it's sort of like playing with that the underworld trope, but actually it's the underworld's kind of like breaking up and coming into the upper world, which I think
I love this idea of the separate narrative of the anabasis of Cerberus.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's kind of how in Antigone, right? Like that's how, like when Tiresias wants to explain like how badly they've screwed things up in Thebes. So like you've put the thing that's supposed to be under the earth, it's up here. Like the body that should be buried is not buried. And then you've put a person who's supposed to be in the above world and you put them underground. And like that is such a symbol of how everything is screwed up at this point. And I think, we have this moment here, like the underworld is coming up, and that's a sign that like the cosmic order is not how
things are bad. Yeah. Like shit's getting real.
Yeah. And we can like, if we want to think about like in Disney's Hercules, right? When the giants or the titans, whatever the monsters are coming up to Olympus, right? It's never a good sign when the things that are supposed to be locked under the earth are coming up, when ghosts are coming up, when titans, when anytime like stuff that is supposed to be locked under the earth are coming up, we know there's kind of a cosmic existential crisis going on.
Which is another great way that the show is operating on those two levels. You can be scared that this is a monster, or if you know what you know, Amy, you can be scared that this is riffing on those hells on earth.
Right.
All right, so here we come to the great confrontation between Zeus and Hera. So Hera confronts Zeus and says, "I've always stayed true to you." Zeus responds, "Oh, calm down."
Because that always works.
Hera, you're being hysterical.
Eye rolls. And then Hera says, "I was the queen of the heavens." So Amy, I want to give you a chance.
Let's talk about this.
This is my moment. I've been waiting for this scene. Queen of the Heavens part is good.
Okay.
So I am, this is not uncontroversial to say, but I am one of the people who very much sees Greek goddesses as being very much kind of they're aware of their connection to more further Eastern goddesses. So your Ishtars, your Inanas, and then we get these moments, especially in Homer, where it's almost, so there's a scene I love when Aphrodite goes down to the battlefield and she gets like speared in the hand by Diomedes and she goes running back and Zeus is like, "Aphrodite, that's not one of your timai. Like war is not one of your honors. You're not a war goddess." And I love thinking of this as being almost a self-conscious look back at like Ishtar is war and love. And you get a lot of these Near Eastern goddesses who get to be both. And that in a lot of ways, the Greek pantheon carves up goddesses into smaller territories, right? You can't be powerful in all of the ways. You can be fertile and a mother, but then you can't be something else, right? And so that it's this very circumscribed roles that women can have. And so I kind of love this as an idea of like Hera was everything until she fit herself into a box and she made herself like, she gave up a lot to marry Zeus, and that she kind of looking back to this kind of more these kind of earlier, and I know this again, people will disagree with me on some of this, but these kind of earlier models of more powerful goddesses who have a wider range of things that she does. And I think here we see this kind of like Queen of the Heavens idea, and that she is right to be extra angry. Like a lot of times we're like, why is Hera mad all the time? And I think especially right now, we're in such a moment of like, we're talking about female rage and we're validating female rage. And I just love, like, of course she's mad. I don't think this is, what are her choices here? You have, in like Greek myth writ large, not this particular story, right? You're married to Zeus. You can't go head to head with Zeus. I love the versions of the story where she tries to unleash Typhoeus, and she tries to like mount an insurrection against Zeus. But I think like her options are limited at this point. And so like, yes, it is, I don't love that she takes out all of her rage against the women that Zeus cheats with, all of these mortal women. But at the same time, I think this idea of a rage that she doesn't have a good outlet for it. And I think it's extremely common and human for people who cannot, we see this all the time with, you know, when you're if you're in an environment at work and it feels like there's only room for one woman at the top. So you're not mad at the 8 men on the board of directors. You're mad at the one woman because that feels like they are the person who's keeping you from that. And so I think this kind of frustration and rage in the face of a patriarchy that says that there's only so much room for you and you can't have more than that is extremely relatable. And I love, like, we're going to get to, like, I feel like she is in the tradition of the Hera who tries to unleash monsters to actually do something about Zeus, as opposed to just sitting there and being like, why doesn't Zeus love me? Like, she will bring the underworld up above. That is, you know, that kind of this, and I think we see a lot of this with Demeter, right? In the Homeric hymn to Demeter, of this, like, this rage, this, like, just, like, righteous, justified, yeah, and it's this like kind of dread rage that you know, the world should suffer because you have been wronged. And I think there's something really powerful, and I actually don't know where the next episodes are going to go, and I may not like where they go with her character, but I'm not entirely, like, put off by this depiction so far of Hera, because I think there are a lot of cool things. I wish there were more modeled, right? She's the only woman. I mean, she's like the Princess Leia of this universe. Like, there's just one female, like, I mean, you know, they have some mortal women, but we just have one goddess.
Our 2 mortal women are both going to be killed, and the other goddesses that do appear shriek and gasp.
Right.
Like,
yeah, we do have the other goddesses who quickly are like, oh no, like,
yeah.
So I have some qualms with the way that gender plays out in this, but I'm not entirely opposed to the Hera. And in particular, I just love that I think this gestures to this kind of Near Eastern tradition that, you know, I see a lot of the Greek pantheon being, especially the goddesses, being like, you split up these powerful goddesses into little pieces, and that's kind of what this male dominated, like, Olympian generation is telling, like, female power can only be this big and no bigger.
Yeah, I'm curious what you're going to think about that, because what I'm now thinking is Zeus is so comfortable, because we think theogonically, Zeus then distributes Timai and he gives it to everybody. So before Hera was queen of the heavens, Zeus then kind of leads everybody to win this battle, and he's contemptuous of her ability to do anything. So even when she throws the columns at him, he just kind of, like, scatters them. So there's this sense that Hera used to be really powerful. Somehow a negotiation of powers happened, and now she's left with needing to find a new way, which she'll do, I assume. Like, at the end of episode 4, it seems like she's found a way. But David, with your kind of experience with these situations, what do you think about what Amy's saying? And
yeah, I mean, yeah, I was very struck by that line of, like, yeah, I was queen of the heavens, and I was wondering if it was tapping into this Near Eastern tradition, as Amy's talking about too. And I don't know, again, I'm not up on this, like, on the history of this theory, but there was that, like, 19th century theory of, like, the earlier matriarchy that was overtaken by the patriarchy, and you see it, like, in the myths with, say, like, the sanctuary of Delphi was the sanctuary to Gaia, and then Apollo comes along, and then it's part of, like, this Olympian order. But I'm pretty sure that theory is, like, largely discounted. But, like, I do know that, like, yes, in the Near East, like, there's this tradition of powerful female goddesses. But, like, I'm just really struck by the fact that, so it seems like Zeus, like, married into this power, which is interesting. Like, and I guess I see parallels, I would say, like, Helen and Sparta, right? Because technically, like, Helen is from Sparta, and Menelaus, like, marries her, and that's how he gets to become king of Sparta. It's really, like, from Helen, from which he gets this power. And yeah, I guess I'm just sort of interested in the fact that this show seems to be sort of tapping into that, and it leads you to believe that. Yeah, I'm wondering, because I don't really like, sort of, okay, we're making the woman the villain, and, like, Hera, it's so easy to make Hera the villain here, and there's like a history of that. But I'm wondering, yeah, if she is going to be more complicated, because we don't see the problems of Zeus's rule. Like, I mean, we had Heron calling out Zeus for kind of, like, the way, like, him not caring enough for his mother and himself, and sort of, like, the other gods seem unhappy with the way Zeus sort of arbitrarily decides when it's okay for him to intervene. That really sort of tense moment between Zeus and the other gods when I forget exactly what was happening, but like they were unhappy with what he was about to do. So yeah, as much as like she is this sort of like evil Disney villain, female, woman, female like villain. I'm wondering, if the show is gonna complicate it, because also I feel like with the whole, if you want to like connect her to the demons that we see too, it's like they are such like stereotypical villains, right? They have like dark skin, they have horns, they're very like, Christianized devils. And there are some lines of like, oh, you call us demons, implying that like you call us that, but are we actually that? So I'm hoping there'll be more complication with this, because I want to give the series more credit than just like, oh yeah, she's the crazy woman who's gonna like cause problems for the universe.
And I like the way in which like the story is saying like is challenging us, because we don't want to really side with Zeus, I don't think, with this kind of treatment of like, come on, it's okay for me to like have sex with other women. And she's like, no, it's not. So she then like yells, and then there's this tradition of saying like women that are yelling are hysterical, and then you can discount them. And so it's like it's playing both sides of this, like, come on, calm down, it's not that bad, which is very contemporary, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think like, and I mean, again, maybe this is my read, but I think it's so on the nose when Zeus says like, "Oh, calm down." Like it feels like it's just such that like dismissal of like a hysterical woman that either it is an extremely like cliche written scene, or we are supposed to be like, dude, that's, and so, I mean, I think we all kind of rolled our eyes when we saw that line of like, oh, Zeus, buddy, this isn't going to work out for you. And so I think, again, like David said, I don't know where this is going to go, but I would like to think that they are doing something more. They're not just like playing into these same kind of tired cliches and like, yeah, Zeus is right. What a crazy woman Hera is being.
Another thing that I'm thinking now is she's able to articulate, like, because of David, one of the things you said, like this marriage happened, power was negotiated. This isn't the first time we've seen this, because that's what Zeus did earlier with the Titans. They're not able, we don't see them express whatever happened, whatever the outcome was. But now we can see another thing, a relationship with Zeus, and she's frustrated by whatever's happened there. And so she's able to articulate it and react in a different way. So anyway, positive looking forward. At this point, though, Seraphim becomes a big character. And I think I spoiled his name. I'm not actually sure when we learn it exactly. But he is named after an angel, which brings in David's huge point of the Christianizing of the demons, sorry. And he has the Bident. And this now becomes a hyper-powered weapon in a way we hadn't seen it before, because he's able to summon it back. Do either of you have any theories on like his affinity with this weapon?
Well, I mean, if it was the weapon of Hades, also like I feel like modern representations of gods like to make Hades the villain somehow too, and I am wondering of like, because like, so Hades, like, it seems like it's like a big part of the gigantomachy. Hades like throws this in the back of a giant, and now he just like forgot about it, and it's just like sort of chilling. Like, I don't know, like I do wonder if not a coincidence that this was like the weapon of the god of the dead. It's also so easy to like connect the god of the dead with evil, given the Christian tradition. So I'm wondering if that's going to come into play at some point.
Which is interesting that like thus far, because I mean it's not really spoilers at this point. Seraphim is the first demon, right? I mean, I think he's the first. I guess it doesn't make that explicit, but I think I was under the impression.
Explicit, yeah.
So he's the first of the demons, and Hera takes credit for like guiding, that she was a big part of this. And so I don't know. I mean, it makes me wonder if like, is Hades teaming up with Hera, or because it seems as though like this is Team Hera over here. And so I'm wondering if maybe they're not going with the like Hades' devil is bad kind of thing that we see in a lot of other kind of modern Christianized tellings of these stories. Which
I hadn't really thought about, but did Hades release Cerberus? Like, why was Cerberus emerging from that cave? Like, was there agency behind that rather than just, oh, here's a random.
I guess we'll have to like figure out in this universe, is Cerberus the guardian of the underworld, or is it just like, oh, we threw in a Greek mythological monster and like maybe Cerberus doesn't happen until, I don't know if they ever make it explicit if that's like the guardian of the underworld or not.
So because
I don't think we've established that yet. So maybe he's just.
But still, if he is, then like that could lead to is Hades doing bad things in the background with all of this.
So this might not be the best time to talk about this, but David, you did mention it earlier. So we see here Seraphim with his dark blue skin, and we just saw both Hera and Zeus with their lighter skin. Heron is a light-skinned man, and so there's a definite racial component that's happening in terms of demonizing the demons, which I think we would be remiss not to comment on.
I will say I like that, like some of like, I guess we call these the Greek, or some of these Greek characters have like olive skin. Like that's good. It's getting away from the whole like super white British accented. Like Heron doesn't have a British accent. Okay, thank God he doesn't have a British accent. But I do think it's interesting how like the most powerful gods are super white and have British accents. Yeah, that's my.
Yeah, so that might be something to keep in mind for the next episode that we do, when we kind of do a larger reflection. Oops, pushing the wrong arrow button. So I love the chimera-like creature that Seraphim rides. Like, we are definitely setting it up that Heron is this booby from like Hodunkville, doesn't like want to do anything, but he has natural abilities. But Seraphim, he's got like this sweet bite, and he's got, I wish this creature had a name. Maybe it does and I missed it, but
we could give him one. What a majestic little steed. I love him.
Yeah. Like, he's like this is your cute, like, yeah, you Amy, you didn't get to have cute Cerberus, but boy, you can have.
Oh, I love him.
Cute, this fellow.
That's very cute.
Who allows Seraphim to kind of move between the spaces through the celestial and the terrestrial in an interesting way. All right, so quickly about the blue flowers. It's kind of a weird note, but personally, I think it's an allusion to the blue flower from German Romanticism, which again fits into this pattern of turning Zeus into like idealized love, like, which means then his love with Hera is not a pure distillation of abstract love, capital L, but his love with Elektra is, and that's why it's created Heron or something.
I'm wondering, why does he use it to protect? I mean, I guess it makes sense why he protects Alexia, but it's interesting how like those roses come out in that moment to protect Alexia when the other demons are hunting her. I don't know if I'm reading too much into it. I'm wondering if there's something, I don't know. Like, do we know about? I just finished the German series Dark, where like everyone has like a sort of like a secret lineage, and I don't know. I'm wondering if there's anything going on with that.
And they're definitely like making problematic Alexia's identity, because later on Hera is going to take her identity on herself.
Yeah.
So quickly then, the name Alexia, right? I guess it's a moment of irony where the person that is the protector needs the protection.
Needs the protection, yeah.
Which in another way just undermines female agency, where it's like, here comes Zeus.
Yeah. But I guess, yeah, on the very surface level, this has to be, I guess, Zeus the lover, idealized love. I know the first blue rose was actually genetically engineered in 2005. That was like a somewhat recent, thing. But the idea of the blue rose obviously pre-exists that.
Wow. So Elektra dies. Heron's mom is killed by Seraphim. Doesn't die. Seraphim kills Elektra's mom. Sorry, let me correct active and passive voice. And Amy, I believe you had a comment about what?
Oh, I just love, okay, so this is Hermes, and we're seeing kind of a top-down view of him. And when he runs, it's this crazy like sonic boom. There's just, I love the visual of this so much. It's so great. He's actually running, like he's not flying, like the visual is very much him running, but like crazy fast. And it's got this, it is great. Watch it, check it out. It's beautiful.
But I think you said like he's psychopumping so hard, or he.
That sounds like something I would say. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is really great to watch him. He does it early on in the Gigantomachy. After they defeat it, he has to take all the souls, and so you see an early hint of it. But here he crosses all of this land, and it is really just beautiful seeing how he makes the leaps, where he goes. The accuracy here, like I love the caducus on the arm, the pedisos, and then this little bit of rainbow here reminding me of Iris, another kind of messenger. So he
Yeah, I
then
like
goes to
that.
the underworld, and now we're entering some serious David territory.
I know. I
So
think
what do you see? Tell us what you see.
I feel like it's kind of a tease. Yeah, I don't know, because we like just got like a glimpse of it. But yeah, this to me feels like very like, I don't know, like Disney Underworld. Yeah, I really liked how they had this sort of like, you had to go over this large body of water, and it's this sort of like cave in the middle of, I don't know if that's supposed to be the ocean body of water, but I mean think of just like how often underworld and sea are connected, because like obviously like sea is people die on the sea, so it makes like sense to like have the underworld be connected with that. And I guess like in the Odyssey it's like the underworld is like, you know, far across the sea. So that was interesting. I think we have a difference. Do we have a slide on the wraiths? I forget, of like the people going, the souls that it's Elektra's soul.
No,
and
we don't have that shot.
Oh yeah, no worries. But Elektra's soul and Hermes see, and actually I thought it was gonna be like an Aeneid illusion, but I don't know if you guys remember like in one part in the Aeneid where like Aeneas sees all these souls of monsters. If you remember, like there's like a minotaur there, I think, and like a few other monster like figures, and like, oh, this is gonna be like these like wraiths that guard the underworld. But actually they were like way new to their side, which actually makes me think, actually, so minotaurs have souls, I guess, so they aren't these sort of like soulless monsters, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah. So a couple things that I like about this is, because we were looking at the architecture of Olympus, this is a reverse, right? Because we have a temple type structure here, but it's fallen and collapsed rather than being up top. We have a similar fountain that we also had earlier, but with the secret of the ooze pouring out of the mouth for our Ninja Turtle underworld.
Ooh, I like that.
And then I like this because this seems to be Hades, almost maybe Persephone. I don't really know what's going on there, but like Hades in his chariot type narrative. But again, we don't get to see Hades, other than maybe if it was Hades that threw the first bite in. Like this is something really like neat.
Which makes me wait. The more I think of like, where was Hades? Like obviously I know he's important. He's Hades. You're not going to see Hades like the second you walk into the underworld. But I don't know. I feel like his absence is becoming more conspicuous to me.
Yeah, I know. Like the more you talk about it, the more so. Especially because like Poseidon has already played a role.
Right.
So we get the activation of the soul, a la Princess Leia hologram. So, there's like some choices. I don't know. It's fun. We're not going to spend time on this though, because we have Charon show up.
So this is a very not anthropomorphic Chiron. But I'm trying to think of like historical representations of Chiron, or like so he's like kind of scary in the Aeneid, right? You kind of get a description of him, and he's like got a robe, and I think he's like fire shooting out of his eyes. So he's definitely like scary. I mean, he's comical in the frogs. Like, I guess you don't really get a description of him, but he's a kind of like goofy like boatman. But here it's like, okay, Charon is like scary monster, very, very not human at all, not anthropomorphized, and he speaks a different language, which I thought was wild.
Yeah, and it's in green, which is a new font color that we've seen too. A really great detail. It fits with the background and everything. But
yeah, I kind of love this visual. Like it feels, and I don't know if maybe it's echoing, like it doesn't remind me of anything in particular, but just this, like I really like this. It's like, oh, this is a good Chiron look. Like I like it a lot. It's not super anthropomorphic, like it's recognizably like these seem like arms, but I don't know, I just really like this look.
Yeah, they're fleshless. There's hair. I absolutely agree. I think this was a great use. So now we jump to episode 4, which was the last episode we watched, which is where we get the Seraphim story. And so Seraphim is rescued by this maid, and then she runs away and is chased by soldiers and needs a place to take care of Seraphim. And luckily a she-bear shows up who already has 2 kids, but that means she also has a free... Do bears have udders? Is it called an udder, or is it like a nipple?
Teat?
Breast?
Maybe?
A teat? Okay. Bear
teat. I don't know.
And so we get classic materials of our hero is going to suckle at a wild animal.
Feral child.
Yeah. So that gives us Romulus and Remus vibes and Atalanta.
Atalanta vibes.
I feel like the Romulus and Remus seems pretty poignant since we're gonna have like two brothers, and where that there's gonna be probably an almost fratricide or a fratricide at some point.
Yeah.
So I do really, I mean, just given that we don't know where this one, like they keep talking about Alexia as being Amazonian.
Right.
And like Atalanta isn't usually described as Amazonian, but like definitely similar energy.
Mhm.
And so I think, like, I really like, just think like, I think obviously like the Romulus and Remus is a much more relevant for what's going on in this episode, but it just does kind of make me wonder about when we're thinking about like what Alexia's deal is, that there's like, we have echoes of a kind of Atalanta story here as well. I liked that.
Does Camilla also feed it a while?
I was just gonna ask that. Yeah, I think she's like a feral. She is like raised on the.
She's got those vibes. I can't remember it specifically. So.
Yeah, but I think it's right to bring her in here.
Really tragic stuff though, like with what happens, because all these soldiers come to kill kind of mid-youth adolescent Seraphim, and in really a brutal scene, like the animals are all killed while trying to protect them. This drives Seraphim though mad a little bit. He was running away, he's wounded, he falls into water, and then he pulls out the bident from this creature that we saw killed back in episode 1, and he absorbs the demon energy, and then performs an Aristea, extremely explicit, cutting off limbs, various things we've seen, inborn battle techniques. And all of this kind of culminates at the end of book 4 with Hera revealing herself to Seraphim. After she had like reminded him of this story and saying, if you true vengeance you seek, oops, that's where we stop. You got to take it after Zeus.
Which I would say, just in this version of like, this is like, it feels like a very kind of cliche, like evil, demon-y, and we have a lot of these kind of problematic, like, right, the darker skin, the things that we kind of pointed out, but it's also a fairly, like, it humanizes him a lot more than before. He just was like, just evil, going around throwing this magic bident at people. And I feel like the picture we get here is one where like he's mad at people who like killed his surrogate mother figure. He just found out that he killed his actual mother. And so I mean, in a lot of ways, like I think we have this very tragic, both like in a colloquial sense, but also in like, we have this recognition, we have this moment of like tragic in a very Aristotelian sense as well. And so, I think, I don't know again where they're planning to go with this, but I do feel like this episode, getting this backstory on Seraphim, really gives a lot of depth to his character instead of just nebulous villain to our hero, whose name is essentially Hero.
Yeah, Amy, I'm definitely agree with you in this. Where this started to give me a little more hope for the series. Not hope for the series, but I'm like, okay, we're not going to do the whole cliche like total good guys, total bad guys. We're like, yeah, he's so humanized with this backstory. And the fact that he's actually the brother, of our protagonist. Like, okay, this is going to be like a family conflict, a civil conflict, and I actually like it because it from like my own studies like of the Gigantomachy, where you have these like older images of like, okay, it's chaos versus order and it's us versus them, but like as you look at like as the myth is presented through different time periods, like eventually it does become a civil conflict. By the time you come to first century Rome, when there's a Gigantomachy, it's 4 civil wars, and sometimes it's hard to tell there's a difference between an Olympian and a giant, or an Olympian and a Titan. And also these people are all related. So is it really that easy to make good guys and bad guys? And the series seems to be doing that. And obviously like the Gigantomachy is over, but like this new race of demons is like I like how they kind of connect Titans, giants, and then demons. Like there's this whole like cyclical violence that keeps happening. And obviously like the rule of Zeus hasn't solved all these problems because we still have this this violence continuing. And yeah, it does seem like they're going to complicate it more, and that kind of makes me hopeful for, I don't know,
I think that's a really important thing to emphasize, David, that you just said, which is the rule of Zeus has not simplified things. It hasn't solved things.
Has it brought reason and whatever the word he uses?
Right. And the other thing I love here is Hera has decided, I'm going to play by Zeus's rules that he established in episode 1, where like we can guide these figures. So I love it. Like episode 4 ended with her like struggling for power, like thinking like I was the queen of heaven. And now she's like, all right, I need to adjust to the new world.
Right. If these are the rules, I will play by these rules. I will win the game on your terms.
Yeah. So I want to thank Amy and David for joining me today for this conversation. We will return for a full discussion of the next 4 episodes. So thank you all for watching.
Yeah, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button.
Beat me to it, Amy.
Someone has to.
Yeah.